Clear your desk now. You're done. You're fired. Consider this your public termination. The words crashed through my headphones as 50,000 viewers watched my humiliation unfold in real time. Preston's face filled my monitor, his perfectly whitened teeth gleaming as he barely contained his satisfaction. Your ideas have become stale. Your contributions, minimal. The company needs innovation, not recycled concepts from someone who peaked years ago. My hands trembled beneath my desk where the camera couldn't capture them. 6 years of dedication reduced to a public execution. The chat sidebar exploded with reactions, some expressing shock, others gleeful at witnessing corporate drama unfold live. Security will escort you out. Your access codes are already deactivated. I've taken the liberty of having HR prepare your final paycheck. He glanced at his watch. You have 30 minutes. Anything left behind becomes company property. I stared into the unblinking eye of my webcam, aware that my expression was being broadcast to employees across 4 continents, to investors, clients, and industry peers. Inside, I was shattering. Outside, I remained statue still. Any final words, Avery? Preston asked, his voice dripping with mock generosity. The silence stretched as 50,000 people waited for my response. I removed my company lanyard slowly, deliberately, placed it on my desk where the camera could capture the gesture. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, my voice steadier than my insides. I wish the company continued success. Preston's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected tears, begging, a meltdown to cement my humiliation and justify his actions. I denied him that satisfaction, even as my world collapsed. The live stream ended abruptly. My screen went black, then flashed to the company logo. Within seconds, my computer access terminated mid-breath. Little did Preston know, this wasn't the end of our story. It was merely the first chapter. If you're invested in this journey already, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, what happens next will change how you think about workplace justice forever. Drop a comment with your worst boss experience. I read every single one. My name is Avery Kincaid, and until 43 minutes ago, I was the head of product development at RiseTech. My journey there began 6 years earlier when I answered an online job posting seeking a visionary developer with entrepreneurial spirit. Back then, I was 28, armed with 2 patents and an unfinished MBA. My previous startup had collapsed when my business partner vanished with our seed money. I needed stability but couldn't bear the thought of becoming another corporate drone. RiseTech was struggling then, a mid-sized tech company with outdated products and declining market share. During my interview, Preston spoke passionately about disruption and innovation, his hands animated as he described his vision. I believed in him. We need someone who can think beyond conventions, he'd said, leaning forward in his chair. Someone willing to break things to make them better. My first creation for RiseTech was CloudBridge, a communication platform that increased client retention by 70% within 8 months. My second innovation doubled our user base. By my 3rd year, I had built a team of 14 brilliant developers who executed my increasingly ambitious visions. Preston showcased me at investor meetings, industry conferences, and client presentations. My secret weapon, he called me, his hand always finding its way to my shoulder. I pretended not to notice how his touch lingered, how his eyes tracked me across rooms. The warning signs appeared gradually. First came the separate meetings, strategy sessions. I wasn't invited to despite leading the products being discussed. Then came the strange interactions with colleagues who suddenly seemed uncomfortable around me. Preston thinks we should take a different approach, became the preamble to ignoring my input. The milestone came during the Baker presentation. I'd worked 18-hour days for weeks perfecting our pitch to land Baker Enterprises, potentially our biggest client. 10 minutes before the meeting, Preston texted, "Taking this one solo. Wait by your phone in case I need technical details." I never received that call. Baker signed a 3-year contract worth $20 million. At the celebration party, Preston raised his glass. When I first envisioned this approach to serving clients like Baker, I knew execution would be everything. My team exchanged glances. They knew whose vision it had been. That night, I made the first investment, 8,000 shares of RiseTech stock purchased through my personal account. It was a substantial portion of my savings, but watching Preston take credit for my work had crystallized something inside me. I needed leverage beyond my talents and contributions. As weeks turned to months, the pattern intensified. My team members were reassigned one by one. My budget was cut. My office was relocated to a smaller space away from the executive floor. Restructuring, Preston explained when I confronted him. Nothing personal. Each time he undermined me, I purchased more shares. Each time he took credit for my ideas, I increased my position. While Preston spent his growing bonuses on Italian sports cars and vacation properties, I lived modestly in my one-bedroom apartment and drove my 10-year-old sedan. He never questioned why I didn't upgrade my lifestyle as my salary increased. He never wondered where my money went. His blindness to my financial acumen became my greatest advantage. The day everything changed began normally. The quarterly all-hands meeting, typically a dry review of company performance, had been mysteriously rebranded as Rise Tech Future Vision with mandatory attendance. I logged in from my desk, noting the unusually high viewer count. 50,000 people watched as Preston spent 30 minutes outlining ambitious growth plans, repeatedly using phrases like fresh leadership and new direction. Then came the moment that began this story, my public termination. After the live stream ended, security appeared at my desk. 2 guards, expressionless as they watched me pack photos, notebooks, and the small plant I'd nurtured for years. Colleagues averted their eyes as I walked the gauntlet to the elevator. Some typed furiously, undoubtedly updating their resumes, fearing they might be next. Outside, rain soaked through my thin jacket as I waited for my rideshare. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, breakthrough innovations, and loyal service, all ending with me, standing alone on a curb, clutching a cardboard box. That evening, I sat in my apartment watching Rise Tech stock dip slightly in after-hours trading. The termination news had leaked beyond our company walls. Industry forums buzzed with speculation. My phone filled with messages from former colleagues and recruiters. I ignored them all, focused instead on the shareholder registry that had updated at midnight. The quarterly filing would now reflect my most recent purchases. At precisely 8:17 p.m., my phone rang with an international number I didn't recognize. "Good morning, ma'am," said a gravelly voice. "This is Jeffrey Harlow, chairman of the board at Rise Tech. I've just landed in Singapore and heard what happened. Completely unacceptable." I almost corrected his formal address, then realized the registry had updated, and Jeffrey had seen it. "Thank you for your concern," I replied carefully. "I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow," Jeffrey continued. "Would you be available to join via video conference? Say, 3 p.m. your time?" As I ended the call, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Preston, minor misunderstanding today. Let's discuss privately before things escalate. Breakfast tomorrow? My treat." I placed my phone on the coffee table and smiled for the first time since the live stream. The game had changed, but Preston didn't know the new rules yet, or that I'd been the one to write them. I didn't respond to Preston's text. The man who had publicly humiliated me hours earlier didn't deserve my courtesy. Instead, I spent the night preparing for the board meeting, organizing financial reports and product development timelines that highlighted the disconnect between Preston's leadership claims and actual company performance. Sleep came in restless bursts. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw 50,000 viewers watching my downfall. Each time I drifted off, I heard Preston's voice. "Clear your desk now." By morning, my phone overflowed with missed calls and texts from Preston. Each message grew increasingly desperate. "We should talk before things get complicated. This is a misunderstanding that could damage both our reputations. Please respond. This silence is unprofessional. I'm trying to help you save face here." The final message arrived at 6:42 a.m. Jeffrey called. "Whatever you told him is being addressed. No need for you to join the board meeting. I've handled it." I placed my phone on my kitchen counter and prepared my coffee, smiling at his transparent attempt to keep me from the meeting. Preston had no idea that Jeffrey had called me first, or why. At precisely 2:55 p.m., I connected to the video conference. One by one, board members appeared on screen. 13 people, whose names I knew, but whom I'd rarely interacted with directly. Preston had always insisted on being the conduit between the board and the rest of the company. "There she is," Jeffrey said warmly when my video connected. "Thank you for joining us, Avery." Preston's face appeared last, his expression a mixture of surprise and barely contained fury when he spotted me. "I believe there's been a miscommunication," he began immediately. "Avery's termination was a standard leadership decision that doesn't require board intervention. Her performance issues were non-existent," Jeffrey interrupted. I've reviewed the product development metrics for the past 6 years. Every major innovation that fueled our growth came from Avery's department. Every product that failed was developed after you removed her from the process. Preston's smile tightened. With respect, Jeffrey, you're looking at correlation, not causation. The successful products succeeded because of my strategic direction. Enough, said a board member I recognized as Tammy, the retired founder of a successful software company. The live stream termination was inappropriate regardless of performance. 50,000 viewers, Preston. Our stock dropped 12% today. A temporary reaction, Preston dismissed. The market always overreacts to change. It'll stabilize once I announce our new direction next week. Which is, Jeffrey prompted. Preston launched into his vision, acquisition of 3 smaller competitors, aggressive international expansion, and a pivot toward enterprise clients. As he spoke, I observed the board members' reactions. Some nodded appreciatively. Others frowned at the ambitious scope. When Preston finished, Jeffrey turned to me. Avery, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. What are your thoughts? Preston interrupted before I could speak. Avery is no longer with the company. Her input isn't relevant to this discussion. Actually, Jeffrey said, Avery holds 26% of outstanding shares, making her our largest individual shareholder. Her input is extremely relevant. The silence that followed was deafening. Preston's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then comprehension as he processed this information. That's impossible, he finally managed. The shareholder registry, updated last night, Jeffrey confirmed, which is why I called this meeting. All eyes turned to me. 6 years of being overlooked, interrupted, and dismissed had prepared me for this moment. I straightened my posture and began speaking with the confidence of someone who owned more than $250 million company. Preston's expansion plan is fundamentally flawed, I said. The acquisition targets he's selected have overlapping products that would create redundancies, not synergies. The international markets he's targeting lack the infrastructure to support our current platform architecture. I shared my screen and presented counter-proposals for each element of Preston's plan. The board leaned forward, engaged in a way they hadn't been during Preston's presentation. This is absurd, Preston interrupted. She was fired yesterday. She doesn't have access to current data. I'm presenting based on the quarterly reports available to all shareholders, I replied calmly. The same reports you presented to investors last month, claiming credit for growth driven by products you removed me from. Preston's face flushed. You're making this personal. This is about business. Precisely, I agreed, which is why I moved to vote on new leadership before approving any expansion plans. Jeffrey nodded. The motion has been seconded. We'll proceed to a vote. This is highly irregular, Preston protested, his composure cracking. I've led this company through its most profitable years. Correction, said Tammy. You've been CEO during those years. The data suggests Avery led the innovations that created that profitability. The vote wasn't even close. By 4:30 p.m., the board had appointed me interim CEO with a mandate to stabilize and grow the company. Preston was offered a generous severance package contingent upon a smooth transition and a non-disparagement agreement. As the meeting concluded, Preston remained on the call, his expression unreadable. A private word, Avery? He requested as others disconnected. I hesitated, then nodded. When we were alone, his mask dropped. You planned this, he hissed. All those years pretending to be just another team player while secretly buying shares. I invested in a company I believed in, I replied. Something you apparently stopped doing years ago. You won't last 6 months in this position, he warned. CEO isn't just about product vision. It's about relationships I've built over years. Clients who trust me personally. Investors who back my reputation. His threat hung between us, and for a moment, doubt crept into my mind. Was he right? Was I prepared for this role? The development lab was my natural habitat, not boardrooms and investor calls. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but I'll have something you never did. People who know their contributions will be valued and recognized. I disconnected the call before he could respond, then sat motionless in my apartment, processing the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. From publicly fired to CEO, in less than a day, the victory felt hollow compared to the years of diminishment that preceded it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jeffrey. Congratulations. The board has approved your first day on site tomorrow. Security has been informed. Preston will clear his office by noon. As I prepared for bed that night, Another text arrived, this one from a number I didn't recognize. You have no idea what you've done. Preston made enemies you don't know about. Enemies who won't care that you're in charge now. Watch your back. I stared at the message, my momentary triumph evaporating. The sender was right. I'd stepped into a role with complexities beyond product development. Preston had run the company for 8 years. His influence extended far beyond its walls. Sleep eluded me entirely that night. By morning, my determination had hardened. If Preston thought he could intimidate me into failure, he didn't understand what 6 years of systematic undermining had built within me. Not just resentment, but resilience. Arriving at the office the next morning felt surreal. The security guard who had escorted me out 36 hours earlier now nodded respectfully as I entered. Employees stared as I walked through the open workspace, whispers following in my wake. Jules, my former assistant who had been reassigned to facilities management 3 months earlier, waited by the elevator. "Welcome back," she said, her expression a mixture of shock and delight. "Your new office is ready." I began. "The CEO's office," she clarified, unable to suppress a smile. "I've been instructed to help you settle in." As the elevator climbed to the executive floor, Jules leaned closer. "Everyone's talking about what happened. The live stream, then Preston clearing out his office this morning. People are calling it the silent coup." The elevator doors opened to reveal Preston standing there, a cardboard box in his arms remarkably similar to the one I'd carried out just 2 days earlier. Our eyes met, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said, his voice artificially pleasant as 2 board members emerged from a nearby conference room. "I'm sure you'll bring your unique perspective to the role." I nodded, stepping aside to let him enter the elevator. As the doors began to close, he added, "Just remember, every CEO serves at the pleasure of the board, and boards can be persuaded." The threat lingered in the air as I turned toward what was now my office. Through the glass walls, I could see employees gathered, watching this exchange. My first test as CEO was happening before I'd even officially begun. How I responded in this moment would set the tone for everything that followed. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward my new office, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes tracking my movement. The glass walls offered no privacy. Every employee on the floor could witness this transition of power. This wasn't just about occupying Preston's former space. It was about proving I belonged there. "Would you like a moment alone before the executive team meeting?" Jules asked, glancing at her watch. "They're gathering in 15 minutes. "No," I replied, placing my bag on the desk that until yesterday had been Preston's domain. "Let's not keep them waiting. But first, can you arrange an all-hands meeting for this afternoon?" Jules nodded, already typing on her tablet. "Main conference room or live stream?" The word live stream sent a jolt through me, memories of 50,000 viewers watching my humiliation. I pushed past it. Live stream? I decided. Everyone should hear directly from me, not through the rumor mill. The executive team meeting began exactly as I'd anticipated, with tension thick enough to cut. 8 department heads sat around the conference table, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. These were Preston's people, selected and promoted based on loyalty to him. Nia, the chief marketing officer, spoke first. "We have campaigns built around Preston's public image. His termination creates significant branding challenges." "I wasn't terminated," a voice corrected from the doorway. Preston stood there, smiling. "The board and I reached a mutual agreement about transition. I'll be staying on as strategic advisor." The room fell silent as Preston walked in and took the empty chair directly across from me. My stomach tightened. This hadn't been mentioned in the board meeting. "Jeffrey called this morning," Preston explained smoothly. "We agreed that an abrupt departure might destabilize client relationships. I'll be helping Avery navigate the transition for 90 days. The executive team visibly relaxed. Several exchanged glances that clearly communicated their relief. Preston wasn't gone after all. I maintained my composure, though inside I seethed. This was a power play. Jeffrey making this arrangement without consulting me first undermined my authority from day one. "How thoughtful," I said, matching Preston's false pleasantness. Though as interim CEO, I should have been included in that conversation. "It was early in Singapore," Preston replied. "Jeffrey didn't want to wake you. We can discuss the details privately after this meeting." For the next hour, Preston dominated the conversation, interrupting whenever I spoke and referring to ongoing projects as his initiatives. The executive team directed their questions to him, not me. By meeting's end, it was clear they still viewed him as the true authority. As the team filed out, Preston remained seated. "Quite a learning curve, isn't it?" he said once we were alone. "CEO is a different game than product development." "What are you doing, Preston?" Exactly what Jeffrey asked, ensuring a smooth transition. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The board is concerned about market stability. Clients are nervous. My continued presence reassures them." "For 90 days, I emphasized. "Initially," he agreed, though Jeffrey mentioned possibly extending if things go well. The implication was clear. Preston intended to use these 90 days to undermine me and reclaim his position. The strategic advisor role was his foothold. "I have an all-hands meeting this afternoon," I said, standing to signal our conversation was over. "I'll announce our arrangement then." Preston's smile faltered slightly. "Perhaps I should make that announcement. The employees are used to hearing from me. They'll need to get used to hearing from me now," I replied, walking him to the door. "That's what transition means." The live stream that afternoon drew even more viewers than the one where Preston had fired me. Employees, clients, investors, and industry observers all tuned in to witness my first address as CEO. I stood before the camera, keenly aware of the parallel to my humiliation 2 days earlier. This time, I controlled the narrative. "Many of you watched my termination during Tuesday's live stream," I began, addressing the elephant in the room. "Today, I'm speaking to you as Rise Tech's interim CEO." Murmurs spread through the employees gathered in the conference room. From the corner of my eye, I saw Preston enter and stand against the back wall, arms crossed. "Business is unpredictable," I continued, "but one thing remains constant. Innovation drives growth. For 6 years, I've led the teams that created our most successful products. As CEO, my priority is accelerating that innovation while recognizing the contributions of every person who makes it possible." I outlined my vision for the company, not Preston's flawed expansion plan, but a strategy built on our core strengths. As I spoke, I watched the employees' expressions shift from skepticism to cautious interest. "Finally, I want to address the leadership transition. Preston will remain with us for 90 days as strategic advisor to ensure continuity with key clients." Preston nodded approvingly from the back of the room. "Questions?" I asked as I concluded. A developer named Zach raised his hand. "Will the product roadmap change under your leadership?" Before I could answer, Preston stepped forward. "I've assured our major clients that our strategic direction remains consistent. Avery and I are aligned on this." This was news to me. I hadn't discussed roadmap plans with Preston or made any such assurances to clients. "Actually," I countered, "we'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all current projects. Some may continue unchanged, others may pivot. We'll make those decisions based on data, not inertia." Preston's jaw tightened. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as everyone witnessed our first public disagreement. The next 4 weeks became a silent war. Preston scheduled client meetings without informing me, then claimed miscommunication when confronted. He held private sessions with executive team members where he contradicted my directives. Twice, I discovered he'd delayed implementing changes I'd approved. While he undermined me internally, I faced external challenges. The stock price fluctuated wildly as market analysts questioned my experience. A profile in Tech Business Review described me as unproven and elevated beyond her capabilities. 2 major clients put their contracts on hold, citing leadership concerns. Each setback fed the whispers that I wasn't ready. The board grew restless. Jeffrey called with increasing frequency, his initially supportive tone growing more critical. "The transition appears rocky," he said during our 6th-week check-in. "Preston suggests extending his advisory role might stabilize things." I sat in my office after the call, staring at the performance metrics on my screen. Despite Preston's interference, product development velocity had increased 22% under my leadership. Customer satisfaction scores were climbing. The innovations I'd fast-tracked were meeting positive early feedback. But perception outweighed reality. As long as Preston positioned himself as the real leader waiting in the wings, I'd never gain the credibility needed to succeed. That night, I stayed late, reviewing financial reports from Preston's 8-year tenure. Around midnight, buried in a quarterly statement from 3 years earlier, I found it, a discrepancy in reported development costs for a project I'd led. The numbers didn't match my recollection of the budget. I pulled additional reports, comparing them against my own records. A pattern emerged. development costs consistently inflated, with the excess amounts flowing to third-party consultants. Consultants whose names I didn't recognize despite supposedly working on my projects. By morning, I'd identified 14 instances totaling nearly $7 million diverted to these mysterious consultants. The pieces clicked together. Why Preston had been so desperate to maintain control, why he'd systematically removed me from financial discussions, why he'd fired me publicly when I'd begun asking questions about budget discrepancies. I called Jules. Cancel my meetings today, and find me the contact information for Diane in financial audit. The next 2 weeks passed in careful, quiet investigation. Diane provided access to payment records without alerting Preston. I worked nights and weekends, tracing the flow of funds through a maze of consultancies. Each discovery built a stronger case, but I needed absolute certainty before making my move. Preston, meanwhile, grew increasingly confident. In meetings, he barely bothered hiding his contempt for my leadership. The executive team had divided into factions, those loyal to him versus those beginning to appreciate my approach. The board's patience isn't infinite, he reminded me after a particularly tense strategy session. Jeffrey mentioned they're considering next steps. Did he? I replied mildly. Interesting. He told me they're quite pleased with recent progress. Preston's smile faltered. Well, we interpret things differently. Apparently so, I agreed. Much like how we interpret company funds differently. His expression froze. For just a moment, uncertainty flashed in his eyes before he recovered. Running a company is complex, he said dismissively, but the board meeting next week will clarify everything. The annual shareholder meeting arrived on exactly day 87 of Preston's 90-day advisory period. Board members, major investors, and executive leadership gathered in the main conference room. Preston sat near Jeffrey, leaning close and speaking quietly as I entered. Good morning. I greeted everyone, taking my place at the head of the table. Before we begin our formal agenda, I'd like to address the elephant in the room, my leadership during this transition period. Preston smiled indulgently. Jeffrey looked uncomfortable. The past 12 weeks have been challenging, I continued, but revealing. They've confirmed what I suspected during my years as head of product development, that RiseTech's potential has been artificially constrained. I distributed folders to each person at the table. These documents outline systematic financial irregularities spanning the past 5 years. Specifically, the diversion of $7.4 million to shell consultancies that provided no actual services to RiseTech. The room went deadly silent. Preston's face drained of color. These consultancies, I continued, opening my own folder, share a common thread. All were registered to individuals with connections to Preston, his brother-in-law, his college roommate, his personal financial advisor. Jeffrey opened his folder, scanning the contents with growing alarm. These are serious allegations. Not allegations, I corrected. Facts. The forensic accounting team confirmed everything yesterday. The funds were disguised as development costs for projects I supposedly led, which is why I never questioned them until now. Preston knew I'd have noticed the discrepancies if I'd seen the complete financial picture, which is why he systematically removed me from financial discussions. Preston stood abruptly. This is a calculated attempt to secure her position. These so-called consultancies provided valuable strategic services, such as, I prompted, market research, competitive analysis, things beyond your technical understanding, he snapped, his composure cracking. Interesting, I replied, because when we contacted these consultancies, we discovered their offices don't exist. Their phone numbers connect to voicemail boxes. Their websites were created the same days they received their first payments. The board members exchanged alarmed glances. 2 investors began whispering urgently. Furthermore, I continued, the timing of my public termination coincides precisely with when I began questioning budget discrepancies in my department. Preston didn't fire me because my ideas were stale. He fired me because I was getting too close to his scheme. Jeffrey turned to Preston. Is this true? Preston's face had gone from pale to flushed. This is absurd. She's manipulating financial data she doesn't understand to secure her position. Actually, said Diane from financial audit, who I'd invited to join us, Ms. Kincaid's analysis is correct. We've verified every detail independently. What followed was the most satisfying 30 minutes of my career. Preston's carefully constructed facade crumbled as board members peppered him with increasingly direct questions. His explanations grew more contradictory, his denials more desperate. By meeting's end, Preston was escorted from the building, not by security, but by two serious-looking individuals from the Financial Crimes Division of the District Attorney's Office. As the room cleared, Jeffrey approached me. "I owe you an apology, Avery. We should have looked more closely at the financial reports." "You trusted your CEO," I replied. "As did I. For too long. The interim title is being removed, effective immediately," he said. "The board unanimously agrees. Rise Tech needs your leadership permanently." Later that afternoon, I stood before yet another live stream. This time, 60,000 viewers watched as I addressed the company as its official CEO. "Today marks a new chapter for Rise Tech," I began. "One built on transparency, integrity, and recognition of every contribution that moves us forward. No one person builds a successful company. It takes all of us, working with mutual respect and shared purpose." As I outlined my vision for our future, comments flooded the chat sidebar, employees expressing relief, excitement, and renewed commitment. The Rise Tech stock price, displayed on monitors throughout the building, began climbing steadily upward. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building something better from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. Preston hadn't just lost his job, he'd lost the narrative. History wouldn't remember him as the visionary who built Rise Tech. It would remember him as the fraud who nearly destroyed it. And me? I'd be remembered as the woman who saved it. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice in unexpected places. Have you ever been underestimated only to prove everyone wrong? Share your experience in the comments. I read every one. Remember, sometimes success is the best response to those who doubt your worth.